Good evening. We are just going to wait a minute for our attendees to sign in. Welcome to the third public meeting for the Humboldt Boulevard reconstruction project between North Avenue to Keith Avenue. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in tonight's meeting. You will see a control panel in the upper right corner. You're currently in listening mode. The orange arrow is your control panel. Your microphone will be muted. You can submit questions or comments in the question box at any point. If you're using a phone, you'll see a question mark. Please hit that to enter your questions. We will address the questions and comments during the Q&A session. During the Q&A session, there will be a feature that looks like the raise hand button. This feature will be available only during the Q&A. I will call on you and unmute your microphone so you can ask your question or comment. Lastly, this meeting is being recorded. I would now like to introduce David Tapia.
Hi, good evening, everybody. As Megan said, welcome to the third public information meeting for the reconstruction project. In addition to everybody who's joined us, just want to introduce some of the key panelists that we have. Megan, she's our support for business liaison, but not just for business, for any and all property owners along that corridor. She'll be our liaison throughout the design and construction of the project. Commissioner Jeff Polinsky should be joining us shortly. We also have Alderman Nick Kovac here. Mike Amsden, James Hanig from our multimodal unit, Carl Rohrbach from our water department, and James Kringer from our forestry department will be here to assist us with answering questions once we get to the Q&A portion of the project. So I'll go through kind of some general project information, kind of give a recap of the second meeting and why we're having this third one, get into some of the discussion points of that new alternative that we're bringing forth, and then we'll get into some questions and answers. Hopefully all of you have joined us for the first two public information meetings, but there's, just in case somebody's just joining us for the first time, I want to go over briefly some generic information about the project. This is a local road project, local road program project. Humboldt Avenue is a minor arterial. The project is going to be the full reconstruction of the 1.5 miles. Currently, our construction estimate is somewhere between $6.5 to $7.5 million, with an approximate 80% federal being federally funded and 20% city funds for the design and construction of the project. The goals for this project are to reduce motor vehicle speeds and make the streets safer for all users, with a primary focus on the pedestrian and bicyclist safety on the roadway. We'll also look to try to maintain or enhance existing green space and landscaping, And generally, the hope is to improve the characteristics and safety of the road by also looking at the underlying pavement conditions and geometry. So we had a public information meeting, number 2. We had the first one a while ago to introduce the project, but back in February, we had a second public information meeting that was held at the Park Pavilion. A lot of the information, or all the information, should be able to be found on the project website, what we presented to the public at that time. A lot of the comments that we received at that meeting had to do mostly with the lane width of the travel lane, looking at ways to reduce speed. There were questions regarding the lead water service replacement. Carl will be getting into that a little bit later in this presentation. There were some comments and concerns with the balance of parking, green space, and bike accommodations on the project. And along the line of the bike accommodations, one of the comments received was to look at a more enhanced bike facility, a safer bike facility. So we set out to do that. And that's primarily the genesis for this meeting, is that we've created another alternative that is going to look at a protected bike lane along the corridor. So alternative 1 is the typical section that we presented at public information number 2, which is sort of a standard bike lane that's between the travel lane and the parking lane. And now for tonight's meeting, we want to show the second alternative, which is a protected bike lane, which will be between the parking lane and the tree terrace area and sidewalk, similar to the photo you see there in the presentation. So our existing roadway out there, we have several different existing along the corridor, but primarily we have one vehicle travel lane, one parking lane in each direction, and we have these, what we consider sort of a standard bike lane, a 5-foot wide bike lane between the two. Along the road, we have locations where we have raised median and locations where we have no median out there. So at the PIM number 2, which again was held back in February, the alternative that we came in, the proposed typical section that we brought to the public was putting in a full median throughout the corridor, a single travel lane, the parking, and the standard bike lane. At the time, we heard a lot of comments related to trying to get a 10-foot driving lane out there. At that meeting, we hadn't gotten confirmation through the Department of Transportation if we would be able to do a 10-foot drive lane. Subsequently, we have. We will be able to do the 10-foot driving lane. The driving lane is measured not from the face of curb. The design standards are there's always a 1-foot shy distance from the curb that's not considered part of a travel lane. So you will see a 10-foot driving lane with a 1-foot gutter pan next to the median. Okay, now the new typical section that we're here tonight to discuss, alternative number 2, is the same 10-foot travel lane. Now this time it'll be next to the parking lane, and we were proposing to put a protected bike lane up at the same level as the sidewalk. It'd be between the parking lane and the trees, and then the sidewalk is going to be on the outside of the trees, so we can leave as many of those terrace trees as possible. To do this, we will have a standard 6-foot median throughout the entire corridor with this. There are, you'll notice some starred notes with the existing right-of-way footprint that we have between Meineke and Center, the protected bike lane will be proposed to be only 5 feet wide to maintain that the 10 and 8 and the 6 foot median. And then between Locust and Keefe, we actually have a little extra right-of-way, so we'll actually shy away from the trees even more. So the hope is to save more trees in that section of the project. So the design considerations for a protected bike lane was we have to, we take into consideration lateral clearances from the parked vehicles, and in there, in the space between the parked vehicles and the bike lane, we'll have signage, and then on the outside, we have the trees to consider. So we have to maintain those lateral clearances in the design of these protected bike lanes. They are separated from the sidewalk. So again, the protected bike lane will be separated from the sidewalk by the existing trees out there. Other things, we're going to continue to use the bump outs at the intersections to shorten the pedestrian crossing distances, make them safer. We will, work with the design of this protected bike lane as they approach the intersections and work inside those curb extensions. And then, of course, the intersections, making sure that the protected bike lanes enter and exit from the curb bump outs safely into live traffic. And of course, making sure that right turning vehicles, left turning vehicles, and crossing traffic are able to maneuver, and as well as the bicyclists, in a safe manner. All right, so a quick comparison of the two alternatives. Both alternatives maintain a symmetrical look. We had heard some comments that was important to people. So we had alternatives that removed parking from one side. That kind of takes away from the symmetry of the boulevard. Both of the alternatives maintain that symmetry. Both of them will maintain on-street parking, but obviously at the intersections where we're developing left turn lanes and potentially right turn lanes, we will have to remove some of that on-street parking near intersections. Both alternatives minimize impacts to the trees in the terrace, but the second alternative with the narrower median may have some impact to the trees in the median. Both alternatives will include looking at the bump outs, ADA compliant curb ramps, as well as all the other portions of the project related to signals and street lighting and sidewalk. All right, with alternative number one, the median width for that range between 9.5 to 13.5 feet. So that wider median would have allowed what we call the signature beds. They incorporate hardscape features as well as plants and trees. The width of that would have allowed it, would allow that. The wider median minimizes impacts to median trees. But looking at the alternative two, even though it's going narrower, a lot of the trees do tend to be right in the middle of the median, so it shouldn't be as a dramatic loss of trees in the second alternative. The first alternative, with the raised median being wider, allows us to create medians at the intersections that will accommodate left turning vehicles as well as pedestrian refuge space. And this typical section is very familiar to all users of our roadways, seeing the bike lane on the road next to the traveling vehicles. The second alternative with the protected bike lane Again, the median width now is going to be only 6 feet. So any signature beds are going to have to be much smaller, a little bit more modified, if that's possible, depending on, what we can do out there. The median width being smaller may impact those trees, but again, a lot of them do happen to be sort of centered in the median, so we're hopeful that we're not going to lose as many as feared. The median being only 6 feet means that as we come into the intersections, we'll have to develop left turn lanes, so we'll be shifting traffic, widening to the outside, a little bit loss of parking in order to do it. It will be little space for pedestrian refuge in 6 foot median. And then last, the second alternative of the protected bike lane being basically between the driving and parking lane and the sidewalk and the trees will require extra caution as people come in and out of their driveways, which is something that people are probably not as used to seeing. As hopefully in the future, we do see more of these and people get far more comfortable with this sort of design. So we put the project schedule up here. Can I give everybody an idea of where we're at? We started the project back in 2017. So for the first couple years, we had that first public information meeting, introduced the project, got some information, some feedback from the public. We began our preliminary design 2020 at the beginning of the year. That's when we held that second meeting. We were working on and finishing our environmental document, which documents, what impacts to the environment a project like this will have. Our design study report, which basically indicates our existing and proposed conditions and gets us that sign off from the Department of Transportation that what we're proposing or what we're doing meets the design requirements. And but based on the feedback that we got from the second public information meeting, we went back to the drawing board to look at a protected bike lane facility. That's what we're here today for, is to discuss that and get more information and more feedback from the public. And from there, we'll modify any of the documents that we need to, if this is the alternative that we move forward with, to move into final design, which will be throughout all of 2021. And in addition, during 2021, we will be doing a lead service line replacement project. And I will turn this over now to Carl to go through that project.
I believe I should have everyone looking at my start screen for the water work, and it looks like my microphone's on as well. So we anticipate lead service line replacement work as part of the relocation work prior to the paving, and also our typical hydrant alterations are required with major reconstruction projects. Just a recap of the Code of Ordinances, lead service line replacement is required under, it's allowed under owner initiated, whether or not there's a leak on the public or private side of the service, in conjunction with a water main replacement project. And then finally, when the city chooses to replace the public side of the service, in this case, prior to a major reconstruction paving project, it's also applicable. Just to show and illustrate the ownership delineation, the public side is typically the water main to the curb stop, and the private side, the property owner side, is the curb stop to the house. So in the Humboldt Boulevard paving limits, North Avenue to Keefe, we are estimating about 250 lead service lines within the paving limits. We will be anticipating summer and fall of next year for construction. We're conservatively estimating 2 lead service line replacements per day, or a window of a 6-month construction window. I have shown on these next graphics. The limits of the project and the different properties. The blue properties are properties without lead service lines or copper. The hashed off area that's in the gray are the projects that have services outside of the limits. And then the tan colored properties are the ones with lead service lines, which we would be targeting for this project. And this is the North Avenue through Center Street. I'll pause on the next slide just so that interested viewers can see. This is the Center to Boulevard location. And then Boulevard to Keefe. So properties that are 1, 2, 3, or 4 dwelling unit properties, there's a city cost share that exists where the owner pays a maximum of $1,754. Our actual average cost for 2019 for the private side services was $5,900. That repayment of the $1,754 can be paid as a special assessment with special financing over 10 years, which would include interest as well. That dollar amount, the $1,754, it's adjusted each year by the city clerk, and that $1,754 is the current rate for 2020. For all the other properties within the construction limits, there is special assessment financing that does exist. The owners would need to pay the full cost of the replacement for the private side. Again, the average cost from 2019 was $5,900. It's a 10-year financing option with interest, and the requirement is that the property owner must use the city contractor to be eligible for the special assessment financing. Prior to the project, I would anticipate spring of next year, we'll be sending out to all property owners a notification that'll look like this that indicates the lead service line is required to be replaced. Included in this transmittal, we're going to include different pieces of paperwork that we require to be filled out by the homeowner or property owner. We're going to require an election to use the city contractor, a right of entry, and then we're going to request that we return the paperwork within 30 days of receiving. The requirement for 30 days for returning the paperwork is mainly to make sure that we get all of the required paperwork for the entire project limits so that we can proceed with the contract without delays. This is what the election to use a city contractor to replace the lead service line will look like. Needs to be filled out completely and then signed by the property owner. And this is a copy of the temporary right of entry to allow the city contractor to complete the lead service line work. Filter pictures will be provided to the properties around the day of the replacement. It's recommended that the filter picture be used during and throughout 30 days after the project completion. It's recommended that you follow manufacturer directions and to use and maintain the filter, and then replacement cartridges are available as needed. I've included just some photos of similar lead service line replacement projects inside the Humboldt corridor. You can see a construction zone with barrels. You can see some construction equipment blocking the road. And on the right side, you can see that the contractor is using a vacuum excavator to likely locate one of our larger diameter water mains in the road. The next slide is on the left is showing the excavation required near the property line, which usually requires the removal of a sidewalk stone. On the right side, you see a new copper water service tapped into the existing water main. Inside the homes, the properties in the basement, on the left side, this is an existing lead service line. That's the silver gray colored pipe coming through the floor, an existing water meter. You can see on the right side, it's a brand newly installed copper meter setting to that property. Another slide showing the completed product inside. The finished floor, or the floor has been repaired for the work that was required to put the new copper water service in, and the meter has also been exchanged with a new water meter. One request is that there's enough space required for the contractor to do the work. You can see here it's removal of the basement floor, and it does require a bit of space for the contractor to do some work. On the right side, we're showing the temporary surface following the service line replacement. Just wanted to show a little bit of what we can expect in this corridor. I've included some links in the PowerPoint presentation. All of these links are available at our water website, Milwaukee Water's website, milwaukee.gov/water. And just there's helpful information, FAQs on lead service line replacement, lead safe Milwaukee information, a lot of good information at those links. And if anyone has specific questions now or later, they can reach out to me directly for this project corridor and for our lead service lines, or they can reach out to our customer service.
Thank you, Carl. David, can you please open up your presentation in case we have questions that we have to refer back to? And in the meantime, before we begin questions, I would like to give the opportunity for Commissioner Jeff Polinsky to say a few words.
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, David and Carl, for presenting here this evening, and for those who are attending and listening in here. Certainly want to give everybody the opportunity, to ask their questions, but hopefully, what you're seeing here is representative of much of the feedback that we received at the last public information meeting. And as we had talked about at that last meeting, obviously there's some limitations to what we can do within the public right of way. There's only so much space, and so we're trying to create a balance here with the different amenities, I guess, that we can provide within the public way to provide for the various needs that are asked for here. Hopefully this is something that's a positive option to be considered. So thank you for that, Megan. And I guess I don't know if we're going to questions now.
Yes, we will begin answering questions submitted. If our panelists can come back on the webcam, that would be so helpful. Thank you. Okay, our first question is from Jake Newborn. Is the cost increase to the alternate design protected raised bike lane covered by the DOT funds, or is it coming from the city? And if it's from the city, is it in the budget?
Okay, I'll answer that one. Anything related to this project, well, I shouldn't say everything. There are things that are considered non-participating items, things with sanitary sewers and water that aren't typically covered by the federal funds that we're receiving. But the bike lane construction costs will be covered by the project agreement with the federal government.
Thank you. Next question, it's a comment. If you can go back to the proposed picture of alternate 2, that might be the best, just to keep it on there. And Mike and Donna, you mentioned the waterworks addresses were difficult to see. That presentation will be posted on the project website. The next question, Robert Schneider. Can you provide a direct comparison of the protected bike lane alternative dimensions to the current dimensions for the section from Meineke to Center?
You're looking for a comparison of what we have existing versus the new alternative 2?
Yes, the current dimensions to the protected bike lane alternative 2.
I'm not 100% sure. We don't have the drill, like what the existing median width is there. Let's see if I can get what we had as what happened to our existing typical. So our existing typical is what you see there, which is about a 10.5 foot driving lane with a 5 foot bike lane next to, actually we have a pretty wide parking lane, 9 feet. And the median varies. Obviously, you're aware that there are areas where we have no median and some areas where we have a raised median. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a side-by-side for every section along the roadway for this. But
we can always follow up with Robert directly with those dimensions.
I think the median in that section is already narrower than north of Locust, so it would be less of a reduction in median from Center to from Meineke to Center, I believe.
Okay. Next question from Noel. To clarify, the cost, this is for Milwaukee Waterworks. To clarify, the cost is $5,900 on the public side, with the owner paying $1,750 for, or is it an additional $5,900 on the private side? In other words, is the total cost $11,800 to do this work?
Sure. The $5,900 estimate was what it costs to do the average private side lead service replacement. And the distinguishing portion of that is just to identify that with the current contributions set at $1,754, that's the homeowner who has the 1, 2, 3, or 4 family property or dwelling property, that's their share of the lead service line replacement. That's the explanation of the 2 costs.
So Carl, just to confirm, a property owner would only pay $1,754.
If they have a 1, 2, 3, or 4 family property, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other figure is the average total cost.
It's just the average
So
cost.
the 1,700 is only a portion of what our cost likely will be. And that was something that's a new policy that we had in response to the data that showed that if you cut into a lead lateral and then replace it, that there's shavings and that causes increased risk temporarily for lead levels in water. In response to that and a lot of other attention that lead in water has gotten, the city instituted this where we capped, where we basically agreed we'd pay roughly 2/3 of the cost, I think, for these situations of water main replacements, for daycares, and in the case of a leak. And so that's only a few years old, that capping of the private cost. It used to be completely on the private owner, all the cost, once on the portion of the lateral that was under private property. Now we're paying 2/3 of the private half.
Correct. And the rest of the public side replacement is paid by the utility, by the ratepayers, by us. It's not part of the owner contributions.
Okay, thank you. Abigail asks if there's a mechanism by which property owners can contribute to a fund to support other owners who can't afford the lead line replacement. That is a great question.
That is a good question. I'm not aware of a mechanism in place at this time, but I will make note of that and bring it to my superintendent.
Thank you. We can follow up with everyone who's attending this meeting with an answer to that question. Rosemary asked what if she believes the lead service lines have already been replaced?
If you believe they've been replaced and you receive notification, calling in and coordinating with our lead service team and perhaps documenting with some photos that we can share of the meter setting, those are all steps that we can do to help verify whether or not the property has been replaced or not. Our records are what I tried to show with the maps that we presented. If there's some discrepancy, we can certainly go through that on a case-by-case basis. We would generally be sending them out to all the properties that we believe to be lead. And if there is some discrepancy, we'll work out those special cases.
Thank you. For those who joined late or wasn't able to see Carl's presentation, as mentioned by Shannon, that presentation will be on our project website, which is milwaukee.gov/DPW/Humboldt. The next question is from Brent. How will snow removal be handled in a protected bike lane? What can we expect in regards to frequency of snow removal?
Well, I guess I'll take that one.
Okay.
So I will say that that's probably one of the items that we are going to have to continue to talk about here. This is a first of its kind. We have not constructed, I guess, a bike facility of this nature. Typically, right now, with the equipment that we have, we do have equipment that could accommodate a 6-foot bike lane. However, the way that we operate and the staff that we have to operate the equipment, we do that work in stages. So we have staff that are in the packers and the plows first, and then after that operation is complete, we will take a contingent of that staff and move them into the equipment that accommodates the sidewalk, the curb ramps, and I would say that the bike lanes probably in this case probably would be attended from that type of equipment, because the bike lane is simply too narrow to take anything else up on it. So right now, I would say that given what we currently have and the way that we operate, it probably would be somewhat phased in that way, where we would have to it'd be kind of a second phase of that operation.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next question is from Denise. How do we protect pedestrians from the bikers in alternative 2?
I'll start with a first thought and then turn it over to Mike and James. But the trees are going to kind of become a natural barrier between the bicyclists on the bike lane and the pedestrians in the sidewalk. The trick obviously will be when we get to the intersections, and now we have to really focus on all 3 users, including the vehicles. Anything else from multimodal to add?
I'm not sure.
I think we lost Mike.
Mike looks like he might be frozen.
Okay.
No, I think you hit the main items there, David. I guess I would just say, like, People should be aware that you can see in the typical section for alternative 2 there that you typically provide a buffer space both between the motor vehicles, whether it's between the parking lane and the bike lane, and between on the other side between the pedestrians and the people biking.
Thank you. Next question is from Jacob. Will the wiring for streetlights be repaired during this project to make sure we have fewer grounding issues along that stretch and can keep it lit?
The question regarding street lighting?
Yes, will the streetlights wiring be repaired?
Yes, so under this project, the entire system is going to be removed and replaced and updated. The wires will go into conduit, so there's less chance of outages due to, you know, currently we direct bury a lot of our system, and so they tend to fail at a higher rate than I think anybody really likes to see out there. So it'll be an all new system. The design will take into consideration the needs for street lighting as well as bike and pedestrian level lighting out there. I believe they're probably going to look to go to a more efficient LED design as well.
Yeah, that's correct, David. I mean, the LED lights, we're converting everything over to LEDs, which definitely provides, I guess in my opinion, it provides a much better lighting experience on the street and the sidewalk.
Great. Deb would like to know, how wide is the current driving lane?
It's about 10.5 feet. The striping project that was done a couple, actually, I don't know exactly what year, but I know it's been a couple years, has about a 10.5 foot striped driving lane.
Okay. John Carroll would like to know, how will a biker safely turn left crossing Humboldt from the bike lane?
I'll turn that over to Mike and James for.
Sorry about that. I lost my internet there for a brief minute. The design here shown, a raised bike lane or protected bike lane is definitely a newer type of bike accommodation. So we're definitely trying to accommodate people of all ages and abilities. So to make a left turn, we would expect that people would make what we would call a 2-stage turn. So when they get to an intersection and they want to cross the street, they would do so similar to how a pedestrian would. They would cross kind of the street that they're turning left on. They would cross that street, they would stop and wait, and then cross Humboldt when either traffic is clear, if there's not a traffic signal, or when the light turns green, if it is at a traffic signal, to make that turn.
Okay, thank you. The next question would be directed to David or Forestry Department, James Kringer. Robert would like to know, which blocks of the corridor would lose the most terraced street trees in general?
Do you want me to answer this?
Yeah.
Okay. Technically, what I've got for the entire project, the tree border area that we have existing now is going to lose 52 trees. And the boulevard that we have is going to lose a total of 29 trees. So you're going to be set for there.
And
go ahead.
Just to be clear, this was a big factor in the design of Alternative 2, and it was one of the main limiting factors that about our ability to put stuff wherever we might want to put it to make everything fit. Some of the ideas that we looked at internally and showed to a few neighbors and multimodal advocates would have involved sort of moving a lane or the tree border a bit, and maybe narrowing a sidewalk. And anything that involved moving either the tree border or the median would have essentially meant all of the mature trees, or almost all, come down, and then we would replant, but everything would be very young for a long time. So we really wanted to avoid that. So this design preserves most of the trees in all 3 phases, right? So I think there's about 100 of each. There's 100 in each tree border and 100 in the median. So losing 25, is that about 25%? Is that what the latest numbers are?
Right. The total I have is 81 trees right now would be lost on the project. The total are 394 total. Estimated value a little above $4.2 million is the estimated value for those trees.
Right. So the value, I mean, obviously people love big trees for reasons well beyond money, but they have a real value too. So the 81 trees we're losing we're not losing them all in one sequence, right? We're losing a tree here or there that might have to come down anyway, or because of a turn lane, or because of individual spots where we have to put a drain. What's usually the reason for the 81 that would have to come down?
The trees that we have, the major ones for the 52 that we have, some are because of raised roots that I have where I'm not going to be able to support that tree, stabilize it when the new wall comes in. The additional ones are going to be turn lanes where I'm going to have left turn lanes that are going to be involved in some of the intersections. That's where we're going to lose most of the trees at those areas.
And we would lose about the same number of trees in either alternative that we're showing today, right? Even if we left the bike lanes where they were, a lot of those trees with raised roots or left turn lanes would have to come out as well.
The raised roots are minor. There's only a few trees that I've got because of the sidewalk being raised are going to become unstable. The main reason that they're coming out is because of the turn lanes that we have and because of the change we're going to have in the boulevard along the center by reducing that as well.
It sounds like it may be a good idea when we have a final plan for which trees will be removed that we can share that with the public so those who are interested can see if that's possible.
Okay, Megan, just one additional point, if I could bring out with this as well. We're going to have 64 additional trees planted on this entire project. We're also going to have 4 signature beds designed. We've got 7 designed now. We're going to modify those to accent and beautify the neighborhood. The tree species are going to be a wide selection that are actually going to accent each block and the homes and the neighborhood to bring out flowers from starting from April all the way through the time of August or September as well on those trees.
Thank you. The next question I can answer partly. It's from Yves LaPierre. He hasn't been able to find full information on this site for this project. Can you clarify public input for bike lanes? How many and what percentage of attendees? Has there been a survey, or is this just a reaction to those who attended meetings? Information can be found on our project website. Again, that's milwaukee.gov/DPW/Humboldt. For input on bike lanes, there is an online comment form where you can submit your support or opposition or your opinions on either alternative. As of right now, we have 16 comments that were submitted online. I don't know about paper copies that were delivered to the project manager. Maybe David could cover that topic. And overall, from the first 2 meetings, we had over 90 people attend public involvement meeting 1 and 2.
Yeah, regarding any paper copies or information that was sent for the first 2 public information meetings, they would be part of our environmental document, and we can certainly get those and put them up on to the project website. This project website's relatively new. In fact, I think Megan created it probably in less than the last month. So we just have to get all this information moved over there so people can see what was presented at each PIM, any of the comments that were received, to see the same comments that we got. Anything that may have gone to the project manager, Sam, since this meeting was announced, he's on vacation, so he may have emails or letters that have been mailed to him that we won't get to until he returns from vacation.
And I would add that it was not exclusively, there was certainly feedback at both meetings, but it was not exclusively that drove our finalization of these alternatives. A lot of emails, phone calls. Some people stopped me in the street and talked to me about it back when people used to stop each other in the street and talk to each other. So it's a bit of all that. And we obviously, there's a few of you on this call, I think, who have seen some previews of this, but a lot of you are seeing this for the first time. So we're not planning on shutting this meeting down and saying, all right, game over one way or the other. I mean, we want you to think about this, talk to your neighbors. There might be some of your neighbors who have want to weigh in, but aren't at this meeting. So email is probably the best, because then there's definitely a record. It's easier to track, but phone calls work too, in terms of how we will get our feedback. Megan, I mean, obviously my email is nkovac@milwaukee.gov, nkovac@milwaukee.gov. I'm happy to get feedback directly. And Megan, you've got a way to send the email directly to your project team, correct?
Yes, they can email me directly. It's for Megan O'Connor at milwaukee.gov, and I will share any comments received with the project team for a record. John Carroll would like to know if the drivers will have difficulty visualizing a biker at a corner where he or she intends to turn if there are parked cars.
At the intersections, we're going to be removing some of the parking away from the corner just for the development of left turn lanes. So that should, and then with the bump outs, that should provide much better visibility for the bicyclists and the pedestrians to see and be seen from the vehicles.
But intersections do create on intersections and driveways, as I think David mentioned earlier, do create new conflicts, as they say in traffic engineering. So it definitely makes the biking more inviting to new bikers, and it makes it safer. Where I have a string of parked cars, but at intersections, cars turn, bikes turn. A lot of things happen at intersections, but hopefully if people aren't illegally parked right up to the curb, the visibility should not be blocked, but drivers might not be used to seeing a bike there, so that is a potential issue. Mike, do you have comments on that?
That's a really good question. I think that's where kind of the devil comes down to the details of each individual intersection. There's some really good guidance out there now on how to design protected bike lanes and ensure that you have proper sight distance, and also that we're doing all we can to slow down some of those turning movements so people aren't turning at speed, so that they slow down and make eye contact with both people riding their bikes, but also people crossing the street on foot as well. So there's a lot of good guidance. Parking will be pulled back to ensure that there is proper sight distances.
I could just really briefly mention too, obviously if this is the alternative we move forward with, we'll have to work out a number of the details at the intersections, but there is a chance that the bike lane would still be raised at the intersection. So you would benefit from a couple more inches where a vertical distance as well.
Great, thank you. Clarence has a question for Carl. Will the corner properties to the south of Humboldt and north be required to replace water service?
The corner properties, if their service is in Humboldt, or in the case of being within the paving limits, those are the services we are targeting for replacement for this project. There were a handful of corner properties throughout the limits that do have the service off the adjacent street and not in Humboldt. At this time, we were not planning on replacing those lead service lines, only the ones fed off of Humboldt.
And again, with his presentation, he included a list of properties that would require replacement, and so I will post that on our website. Robert Schneider, again, he asked his question about the cross-section dimension comparison because the 5-foot proposed terrace width under the protected bike lane alternative seems narrow after the other changes are accounted for.
Oh, so the proposed between Meineke and Center, yeah, the reason for that is that's the narrowest roadway width we have out there. And to provide 2 feet from the trees, the 2 foot from the parked vehicles, and we would end up, if we left a 6-foot bike lane, we'd end up with a 4-foot median only face to face. And the trade-off is the wider median that provides pedestrian refuge over the loss of the 1-foot bike lane for that distance.
And just real quick to add on to that, David, just to I'm trying to read the slide there. So there's 2 foot shy distance from the bike lane to the trees still.
Yes.
So even though, and this is a little bit hard to visualize in street mix as shown here. So 5 feet is narrow. It's kind of as narrow as the existing guidance. And again, this is all relatively new, even in the U.S., but there's some really good guidance out there. 5 feet is kind of the recommended narrowest width bike lane that we go to. But the difference here is the buffer from the bike lane to the tree, which very well likely will be grass, but you can actually ride all the way to the right of that bike lane. You can use that entire width. And then the buffer between the bike lane and the parking lane, I don't think we see, this is a great, thank you. You can see here that bike lane, that's a 5.5, I think, foot bike lane in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It varies between 5 and 6 feet along that corridor, but really with the buffer space between the bike lane and the parked cars, you have an additional 2 feet plus, you can use that entire width. So it's not as narrow as if you had 2 vertical curbs on either side of it. You have a lot more usable space there. And it's a constrained condition for 3 blocks, but it is within kind of the existing guidance that we have available to us.
Okay. Hi, Carissa. You have a question or comment for Carl. It seems like Waterworks should be ensuring whether the replacements have been made already and not placed on the property owner. Carl, would you like to address that?
Yes, I'm understanding that question as if the lead service line has already been replaced. If that's how I'm.
Yeah, that you should be ensuring you should know whether the replacement has already been made, and it shouldn't be on the property owner.
Correct.
And you need to verify.
Correct. We have our records that indicate what's been done and what hasn't been. We will send out the letters to the corresponding property owners that we believe to have lead service lines. If the property owner believes differently, they need to have that correspondence with us. And there's many phone conversations, an email with a photo can resolve whether or not we have accurate records for what is on the private side. But that happens with the coordination process. And when the residents have an opportunity to look at the presentation closer and the addresses are marked, whether or not they're lead service or not, that's just the initial step right now. Those are the properties that we intend to send the letters out in spring. So you're correct. We have our records. We will send out according to what our records indicate.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if I can't see the slide presentation, but maybe if you want to put up an existing between alternate 2 or 1, Denise's next question is understanding where you take the extra footage from alternative 2. Alternative 1 is 24.5 feet and alternative 2 is 27 feet. This is her calculation from the pictures.
Regarding,
where did you gain the extra footage? I'm guessing that is from the median, but you can confirm.
yeah, trying to, what were the 2 dimensions? So we were showing 11, 19, 24 in the, with an 8, 5, 10, and 1, but you can see we have a much wider median, 9.5 to 13.5. And then when we bring this down, what we kind of did was we start the bike lane, the outer edge of the bike lane was about where the existing curb and gutter is now, and then worked everything in the existing footprint of the road.
Okay. Jake Newborn asks, what snow removal equipment is used on Bay Street raised lane?
I believe they actually can, because it is a wider, that actually is a wider lane than 6 feet. I don't know off the top of my head the width there, but I believe they actually can get a pickup truck with a blade on that lane.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe that's correct.
From Carissa, will you pre-brine the raised bike lane?
What was that?
Will you pre-brine, it's a snow term, the raised bike lane?
So we are actually, I would say we're experimenting. We have some equipment that allows us to do that. We did a little bit of that last winter. And it would certainly be a good opportunity for us to be looking at doing it here. But we are kind of in the works with the idea that at some point in time in the hopefully near future, we'll be able to actually do that on sidewalks throughout the city.
Great. Next question is more directed towards Mike and James. From David Loken, perhaps outside the scope of this meeting, will we see these bike pedestrian design features become more standard in future reconstruction projects? Well done, by the way. Thank you for your efforts. Well, that's a kind note. Thank you.
I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on that one. I mean, I think this kind of just gets back to our complete streets policy as well, where every street's going to be different. The needs of each street is going to be different. The construction budget, the width of the street will be different, but absolutely, this is something that we want to look to be doing wherever possible. You know, it's something that we're considering on Bay Street. Excuse me, too much talk to Bay Street, Beecher Street down in near the development at First and Beecher as well. So it is something we're looking at where appropriate, but every street will be different.
We have a reconstruction project of Walnut from 20th to 12th where we're early. We're less than 30%. We have a PIM scheduled this fall, but our initial preliminary plans that we're going to bring to the public will show a protected bike lane similar to this.
To follow up some questions from Larry Hoffman, what's been the experience in other cities with the bike lane between parking and the sidewalk? So your research with other cities, Mike, if you've gotten any feedback from them.
Yeah.
And also, where will scooters travel?
Let's start with the first part of that question. So protected bike lanes are definitely they're relatively new, but they've been around in the US now for 13 years. Many cities, I mean, the examples shown here, Missoula, Montana, Cambridge, Massachusetts. So a lot of cities have protected bike lanes. We have protected bike lanes here in Milwaukee. This is just, you know, a kind of a more capital intensive project because it's a reconstruction, but most cities, almost every protected bike lane project has found that streets become safer, not only for people riding their bikes, but for all users, because as you can see here, we're kind of, you know, narrowing things. We're making the street kind of a slower street for all users. So crashes typically go down for all users of the street. And most cities also see a pretty substantial increase in the number of people riding, as well as the types of people riding. This gets back to that, you know, all ages and all abilities, where we're really trying to accommodate people who maybe want to ride a bike in the city, but just don't feel safe doing so, mixing with traffic. So we'd expect a safer street, a street that is more conducive to speeds appropriate for a neighborhood, and hopefully more people riding their bikes.
And your favorite topic, scooters?
Scooters. Scooters can use a bike lane, so they would be allowed to use the protected bike lane if scooters are back in Milwaukee.
Other questions that Larry has can be referred back to David. Must there be so many traffic lights at an intersection? So this is in regards to the monotube poles. And in relation to that, we've never needed flashing yellow arrows. Why must we have them? So if you can kind of explain the reasoning behind having a flashing yellow on Humboldt.
Okay, yeah, which Scott Reinbacher were here with, as the traffic engineer, but the flashing yellow is primarily used to eliminate the confusion when a green ball would come up. You'd have the green arrow, but when a green ball would come up on the head that was the left turn, a lot of people thought that was giving them the right of way to turn and not yield to oncoming traffic. And so the decision was made that this, and it's not a city, I mean, it's a national thing, that the design was to implement these flashing yellow that tell the driver that they can make the move if it's safe. And so that's kind of the genesis behind that flashing yellow, was to eliminate that confusion that was happening. The number of signal heads and the signal poles, depending on the geometry and how many different maneuvers an intersection might have, should be less with the monotubes. We're pretty much trying to just maintain a near right signal standard with a head, and then a far right with the signal heads required on that far side versus the other one in the median, the other one on the far side. So it should reduce the number of vertical poles that you see at an intersection. But the number of heads is related to the number of movements we have out there.
David, do you think we could get a visual of what that may look like, just so everyone can kind of have a better idea of what you're referring to in regards to the street lights or traffic signal lights?
Sure, we can. They're looking for what the monotubes will look like, or what the whole
I'll follow
layout.
up with you. I just think there's a better way that we can explain this visually. So bear with us, residents. We'll follow up with you on that. Deb's comment, bump outs and roundabouts have been installed in River West this summer, but many streets are full of potholes that have not been addressed.
Well, I guess I can take this. So I think you may be referring to the bike boulevard, some of the improvements that were being made as a part of the bike boulevards, possibly. So obviously there is a balance in the investment and the resources that we have to make those investments. If we were able to leverage some, I think it was state grant funding. Is that correct, Mike and James? For the actual bicycle boulevard. So
would have been federal and local through a transportation alternatives grant.
So, okay, so it's federal. So we always try to leverage as much federal and state money as we can for various investments and improvements throughout the city. But when it comes down to it, I mean, there are limited resources for the different things that we can do. And while we probably we would agree that there are many streets that could use further improvements, we are trying to balance the resources that we have to, I guess, to bring those improvements to the community.
Okay. Rosemary has asked, what is the color of the LED lighting? Such as, is it a blue, white, bright light, amber light?
Yeah, from my understanding, it's kind of a softer white. It's not the real harsh white that some of the earlier models of LEDs. I mean, there's been quite a consistent change over time, over a fairly short period of time in that LED technology. But I believe that we've got to a point now where it's something that's a little bit of a softer white light.
Thank you, Commissioner. Carissa would like to know if we could have a soft curb-like Bay Street.
I I think you're referring to the rolled curb that we have
Yeah.
on Bay Street. Yeah, I mean, David, I think, I assume you're familiar with that. That probably requires, there probably some additional width there. I don't know if there's drawbacks to one or the other.
Referring to just putting the rolled curb next to the parking lane only, right?
I believe that's what
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I don't know if so there would be no curb adjacent to the bike lane. So I don't know what the intent of the rolled curb would be here. The bike lane would be at the same level as the buffer. Yeah, this shows it, the buffer space between both the parked cars and the terrace and pedestrian space.
If Carissa, you need further explanation, just let us know.
And I guess I would say that, a rolled curb would maybe invite people to cut between the roadway and the
Mhm.
bike facility. I'm not sure that's what we would really want to accomplish here. With the narrower roadway, I think it's the preference would be to have the bicyclist be using this bike facility.
Yeah.
Another comment from Robert. He just wants to say thank you so much to all DPW staff for coming up with another alternative that provides excellent bike accommodations. And thanks to Alderman Kovac for listening to residents. Shannon asked about LED style streetlights. We did answer kind of the hue of the lights. It is a softer, not as bright light. James Kringer, the next question from Abigail is, where would the signature beds be located?
I've got two signature beds that are going to be located between Center Street and Meineke, and the additional two are going to be located between Locust and Keefe. One's going to be in front of the Colectivos, and the other one's going to be further next to Keefe. And one signature bed will be just south of Locust Street, where the new median is going to be designed, and the other one further on south of there.
Okay, thank you. She would also like to know where the trees are going to be taken out and replaced. And I think once we have a final plan, that can be shared publicly, so you guys are all aware of that.
Correct.
A couple questions from Deb. How wide is the current parking lane?
The current parking lane is 9 feet.
Okay, and oh, sorry.
And our proposal to bring that down to 8.
And how do the curb bump outs affect the bus stop?
We'll work with MCTS to determine if they want to have the bump out to the bus so they don't have to move out of traffic and then merge back in. They'll make that decision, and we'll work with them to design the bump outs to accommodate what they feel their needs are.
Thank you. Aaron would like to know if the speed limit will remain 30 miles per hour.
Yeah, the project is designed to that. We designed for 5 over the posted speed limit. That's what we're designing for. Our hope is that our design with a 10-foot lane, the bump outs, that it will result in reduced driver speed without, putting the speed limit sign 5 miles an hour isn't going to, if people aren't going to drive the speed limit, they're not going to drive it if it's posted 25. So hopefully the engineering design helps to result in slower driver speed.
Are we not under any obligation with the state because of the funding regarding the speed limit, or are we?
No, I mean, it is our road. If at some point the decision was made that you wanted to have that lowered, I'm sure there's a process that we go through to determine how that's done, but it can be. So
I would, this is Jeff. I would just, I know this was something that we had talked about at the last public meeting as well, the potential to consider a lower speed limit on Humboldt. And certainly, and Mike, I don't know if you've had conversations with Scott Reinbacher on this, but our traffic engineer, but it is certainly something that we can discuss further and consider in more detail. There's actually a number of streets similar to Humboldt that we want to have similar considerations.
Yeah,
on speed.
we've lowered it on Brady and Downer and several actually, and citywide. So it's definitely an option if people want a lower speed limit. Although I do agree with Dave that if you design a street that's hard to speed on, that's much more effective than, because the speed limit has to come with enforcement, and that's generally intermittent, or I mean, it's impossible for that to be too consistent. So if you design a road like Capitol, people are going to go 40 or more, even though that's above the speed limit. But if you design a road with narrower drive lanes, people should just naturally go slower, but they don't always.
Thank you. Rosemary would like to know if there's a map showing the streets where the new turn lanes will be.
Oh, the design plans? Yeah, those shouldn't change if we go to this alternative. So our current, what I call our sort of 60% design plans, if they're not on the project website, can be placed up there, and you'd be able to see which intersections we'll be looking to widen for the development of left turn lanes. Obviously, with this second alternative, having a narrow median, the development will look different than what might be in those plans that were using a wider median, where we could actually kind of carve out the left turn lane in the median. But as the project progresses, as designs move forward, we're able to share this information through the website.
Yes, and Rosemary, I can follow up with you directly on those locations, as well as making sure it's on our website.
I think just FYI, it's kind of shown graphically on the website right now where they're located. It's not I don't know if it's the design. The design plans I don't see, but like it shows it graphically at Teeth, Burleigh, Locust, Center, and North Avenue, either improved or new.
That's from isn't that one of the PIM2 handouts?
Yes.
Kind of had a graphic of what we were, how intersection treatments were,
Yep. Yeah, it's on the website.
Yeah. That won't change. It just might look different than the plans that we currently have.
Eve's comment is that he finds the bike lanes behind the parked cars on Kilbourne creates blind spots and conflicting points with cars. He continues to bike in the car lane for safety so cars can see him.
I would say, that's, again, it's really trying to design towards that all ages and all abilities user. So it's this kind of dilemma we face where people who ride their bikes today, they may not necessarily like protected bike lanes, but if there are certain locations where you think there are visibility issues, let us know, because even on Kilbourne, we did restrict parking quite a bit at some locations, and we will do so here. And again, we'll use the guidance we have available to us to ensure that sight lines are appropriate.
And I think, one thing I would add to that is, anytime we introduce something new to the community, whether it be flashing yellow lights at left turn lanes or the protected bike lanes, roundabouts, there was a learning curve there too. It does take the community some time to really clearly understand both, I think, from a protected bike lane, I think both from a bicyclist standpoint as well as a motorist standpoint. I think the more that we build protected bike lanes, and the more that people become familiar with them, you know, it will only get better, the understanding at those intersections and conflict points.
Thank you. So a follow-up question from Deb, and I think this is off of an example photo in our presentation. Is the area between, on the side streets of the, on the side of the street, the area between the trees, will that be paved or grass?
It's one of those detail questions. I think we would probably go with grass on the side between the bike and the tree. So that way it would just be grass from the bike lane all the way to the sidewalk with the trees in there.
Yeah, there's, I think that's, I've just kind of been thinking the same thing, David. Like, those are all the details that need to be worked out still, but there are a couple options.
Yeah, and it gives a better chance, and James Kringer can confirm this, but I think not putting a hard surface next to it would improve the chances of the trees surviving the construction.
Right, exactly. The more area you get for nutrients and water to go in, the root system develops within there, and the tree stays healthy as well.
And there really is no reason for us not to leave grass there between all the trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would expect the grass would stay in the tree border.
Right.
Yes, I hope so.
Great question. A comment from Noel. Great job, DPW. Really great progress. Humboldt is a wonderful start to protected bike lanes in Milwaukee. Thanks for listening to the public and being forward thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah. Carissa is following up on the previous question. She is more interested in the soft curb question than the pre-prime bike lane question. Well, we covered both, so I think that might have came in later. Couple more questions from Deb. If a lead water line is not replaced, will it affect the neighbor's water?
I guess the answer is we're going to make the attempts to reach out to all the property owners to make sure that all lead service lines in this corridor are replaced. So the hopes would be that the neighbors won't have that occur. Essentially, though, the lead water lateral to the property is specific to that property once it leaves the water main.
There's no way for water to come from a lateral back into the main, correct?
Correct. It's from the main to the house through the lateral. So one lateral won't impact the other lateral. But the larger point I want to make is that we're reaching out to everyone. We're going to make sure all eligible property owners within this corridor get the notifications, get the paperwork in, and get the lead service lines replaced prior to the reconstruction. That's the goal.
Great, thank you. Deb also has mentioned that the 2 blocks north of North Avenue have no median. David, if you want to talk about, I believe we're adding medians in certain locations. How will this fit? Will the trees on the side of the road be removed?
No, so what the design that this alternative 2 now is going to do is create a consistent 6-foot median throughout the corridor. And should
I think even in
have
alternative 1, we were going to add medians where there's right now there's several blocks that don't have medians. We were always going to add them in, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Shannon's question is, will the traffic signals all go to flashing red or yellow at 11 p.m. as they currently do, or will they be metered throughout the overnight hours? I may direct that question to our traffic team and follow up with you, Shannon, directly on that. I don't have the answer. James Kringer, if you can answer Rosemary's question, If option 2 removes 81 trees, how many trees are removed in option 1?
I have to take a look and see. Technically, I considered option 1 and 2, and they were still the same that had to be removed, same total.
Okay,
And it was primarily because of the turning lanes that had taken place, and just a few of the boulevard because of the narrowing and the turning lanes on there.
thank you.
And once we get into really get into the design of those protected bike lanes, and we start looking at the profile and the proximity to not all of the trees in the terrace are exactly the same dimension from the face of curb, as same as when we talked about in the median, where most of them are right down the middle, but some of them might be staggered left or right of dead center, and so with a narrow median there is the potential. So both alternatives are, the goal is to achieve the minimum number of trees lost as possible, but that's not to say that if this alternative 2 goes forward and we start going into design, that there might not be a handful of additional ones just because they happen to be too close to the proposed bike or offset the center of the median. But we will, once we get to that point of knowing it, we can put something out on the website that shows, okay, here are all the trees that we're going to remove, and then follow behind that with Jim's planting plan of where then the new trees will go in.
Great
Hey,
idea.
David, just one question. One question I bring up. The bike lane, the installation of the bike lane is not going to impact on any of the trees on this entire project. One I've got. That's not going to affect them at all.
Correct. The outside edge of the bike lane is proposed to sit where the top of the existing curb is now and be built towards the inside of the road. The only question will be any tree that, due to where it's located, is not 2 feet from that edge and doesn't give us the necessary lateral clearance, we'll have to remove for safety purposes.
But those trees would have been in danger anyway, right? With the reconstruct as is, potentially?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the reconstruction, we were actually going to look to move the curb away from the trees 6 inches on each side to give us enough space to construct the new curb to minimize the loss of trees. But again, you don't know until you start really going out there and how each one is going to be impacted by construction methods. So the numbers that Jim is coming up with are very good ballpark numbers.
Just a brief point. When they come in and run the slip-form paver, the paving machine that actually pours the curb and the gutter simultaneously needs 2-inch clearance. So looking at setting up a 6-inch clearance, so this machine, after you pull the curb out, you can go on and slip the curb and the gutter simultaneously with not impacting at all on the entire root system on the curb side.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Robert Schneider would like a guarantee that Humboldt Boulevard is 25 miles per hour. Thank you. C. Hudson, can we at least use speed monitoring electric signs? So can we add these electric speed signs along Humboldt?
The police department has a sign that they move around, and the more people that tell me speeding's a problem in a particular area, the more I ask them to put it in that area. I mean, it's not just one. I think there's a couple, but and there's options. We tend to put them in, a lot of commercial areas get them pretty often, but it can be done, yeah. But not, I mean, permanently it's not impossible, but do we have any permanent ones up?
We do have a few. I don't know that they're, I don't know, I mean, I think they have a little bit of an impact in some locations. I'm not sure that they have a significant impact. They are obviously more costly to utilize, to use or install and maintain. And that's really one of the main reasons we don't see them more broadly used. But I believe we've done some before and after studies that, you know, there's probably some immediate impacts, and that's why the kind of the mobile ones are sometimes more beneficial if you're moving them around and then backing them up with enforcement, that you get some desired result from it. But just to simply have it in place over time, I think they kind of lose their effectiveness.
To follow up on Robert's previous comment, 25 miles per hour is much better for pedestrian crossings, and pedestrian safety should be a top priority. This is a walkable corridor and has a major bus route. I'm glad that the city is looking at lowering speed limits on many streets.
Yep, and I would just add to that, you know, I think, you know, we can definitely have, you know, a good discussion over what the speed limit ultimately should be signed. I believe, in my own opinion, that 25 mile with what we're designing here, 25 miles an hour speed limit is probably the appropriate speed limit to set here. So just want to make sure that, you know, we obviously have discussions. Obviously want to talk with you, Alderman, but it definitely seems appropriate.
Great. Jason would like to know if we can get green paint to mark bike crossings.
I know we've done that in the past on some projects, Mike. We typically do that where bike lanes kind of go through free flow right turn lanes. I think given the number of driveways and other things, it's going to be a lot of it. I don't know, you know, again, that's kind of a detail thing as we work out.
Yeah, it's a detail. It's absolutely a possibility. You see here in the photo, you know, I'd imagine that's probably at like a higher volume driveway or alley perhaps. But yeah, we'd want to look at kind of each individual driveway or alley and see where it may be appropriate.
Okay, Rosemary is concerned about the loss of the medians in option 2. What is the logic of protected bike lanes if there's a bike boulevard just a few streets away for those who don't feel comfortable with the bike lane to the left of the cars?
Mike, you want to get started?
Yeah. So, you know, I think this is just, it's an opportunity with this being a reconstruction project where we want to really implement our complete streets policy and ensure that we're designing our streets for people of all ages and abilities. You're right that the bike boulevard in River West and Harambe is a great kind of alternative, but people will still be riding their bikes on Humboldt. There's families on Humboldt. There's parks on Humboldt. There's connections to the Oak Leaf and the Beer Line trails along Humboldt. There's some retail. So, you know, this is just, it's an option to really try and design the street to that all ages and abilities level for people riding their bikes.
Thank you.
If I could jump in really
Yep.
quickly too, my video is, my connection's bad, so I'll just stick to audio if that's okay. But I'd also mention, you know, while they both, a bike boulevard and a protected bike lane do serve a wider range of all ages and abilities typically, you know, you could also consider that the speed and the experience is different between the two facilities. A bike boulevard is meant to be a little more, a little slower and a little more leisurely, like all speeds should be a little bit slower, whereas a bike boulevard might encourage more through traffic than a bike boulevard.
Thanks, James. Carissa has mentioned that Humboldt and North is one of the city's high-risk injury network. Can you articulate to the audience what facilities will help improve that particular intersection? Also, in general, can you provide data for the public post the project as to how well these changes improve for all users of this project scope?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sitting in for the project manager, so I'm not 100% sure of all the design elements that are occurring at every intersection. But related to showing data afterwards, I believe we've done this in the past where we've collected data after the construction for a period of time, so we can compare it against the existing data that we used, that was used in the design of this project.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just, again, with this being kind of this alternative of a protected bike lane, there's going to have to be a lot of attention paid at each intersection. So the intersection at North, even with the protected bike lane design, we'll have to really look at that to make sure that it's compatible with the protected bike lane, but also pedestrian safety is considered and improved upon. And then for the data collection, we, as some of you on the call know, we have a new Complete Streets annual report, which lays out pretty clearly what we should be doing on projects like this for data collection. So at a minimum, we'll definitely be out there collecting speed and volume and crash data before and after. And then we also may consider some other criteria we want to look at that may be unique to the corridor. Passing on the right is definitely something we heard about. Hopefully that'll be eliminated with the curb extensions, but we'll want to make sure that that's working as intended. Encroaching on the bike lane, pedestrian yielding rates, these are all things we can consider, but at a minimum, speed, volume, and crash data will be collected.
And I would say that we've made some ad hoc improvements that are very effective, and the data proves it on Locust and North bridges. But frankly, even with the full redesign of Humboldt, which is very much not ad hoc, it's a full reconstruct, there's still going to be a gap, in existing conditions, because you get over the bridge and you're not quite to Humboldt, and that gap is not the best place to be biking right now. It's almost, and the fact that if we do go with alternative 2, we'll have these physically separated ability to bike on Humboldt and to bike on the bridges, but there'll be gaps between them, and that'll be something hopefully we don't have to wait all the way for a reconstructive Locust and North to try to address, because I don't, I think that gap is what's driving some of the danger, at the intersection there at Humboldt and North. But this will help. I would assume it would help, but it's not over.
Thank you, Alderman. Rich has a comment in support, or his comment is in support of the protected bike lanes alternative 2. Thank you for responding to community input. He has a question regarding snow removal. He had to step away, so he apologized if this has already been answered. What considerations were made for ensuring the bike lanes get snow clearing? Is it wide enough for the smaller city snow machines to address?
Yes, I mean we do have equipment that we use on the curb ramps, along the sidewalks, that would be appropriate for using on this bike lane as well.
Denise wanted to know if this meeting is being recorded. It is, and I will post this on our website following the meeting. C. Hudson's comment is just to let us know that speeding is a problem. Deb has a question. What is the plan for on-street parking during construction?
The on-street parking is going to have to be removed during construction to allow, so the first phase is going to be, we're going to move traffic from one side to the other, have bi-directional traffic to construct one of the two directions, either north or south. So the parking will have to be removed from there. I think typically we try to work with the neighborhoods to remove parking restrictions on nearby side streets to help with that. I can look into that and figure out how parking during construction and find out exactly how we're going to address that. I mean, we handle this unfortunately, with all our reconstruction projects. That is a big issue because that will be lost during construction. And I'll get an answer.
So more to come to that when we get to construction staging details later on in our final design plans.
Yes. Yeah, all the construction details will probably be occurring middle of next year. We'll start laying out how we're gonna stage it and construct it. So look for that information as soon as we've fleshed out those details.
And you'll have to figure out the traffic staging as well, right? And those kind of influence each other. You know, you might want to do one, you'll do one half and then the other most likely in terms of.
Correct, right. And then, so alternative one would likely allow us to put bidirectional traffic for both stages. Alternative two, there wouldn't be enough pavement, so we'd end up in the second stage requiring it to become a one-way road during the second major construction stage. So those are things that we have to take into consideration.
Okay.
But all those parking and traffic would be temporary for construction, but either way, it's going to be 2 summers of construction, first for the laterals and the main, and then for the reconstruct.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the public's ready for this. So in 2021, not only will Milwaukee Waterworks be out there with the laterals, but we typically have all of the private utilities go out the year before. They'll probably be out there late summer, fall, and into the winter, relocating any of their facilities ahead of the construction project. So it's going to be 2 years of basically the road being torn up and worked on.
So bear with us. Rich is saying, speaking of gaps, Humboldt Boulevard south of North Avenue down to Commerce in the river is another that will stand out post completion. Jose Castro, as someone that would like to see the protected design become the standard design in Milwaukee, I want to thank you for taking the time to create option number 2. Is there a possibility of using dedicated bicycle traffic signals at higher volume intersections, such as Locust and North?
Yeah, again, each intersection is going to be different. Bicycle traffic signals are one option for separating movements and making intersections safer. So it's, again, as we get into those details, you know, we'll be considering all options. So that is a possibility.
James Hannick here. It's also worth considering that at a minimum, we would be at least looking at bicycle detection at some of those intersections to help move the signals.
Okay, that was our last written question. Oh, no. Deb wants to know what will happen with River West 24.
Well, if you could see me, I'm wearing my River West 24 t-shirt, so huge supporter of River West 24. You know, we've worked with the event organizers in the past when we've had projects that were kind of within that event's limits. And you know, I think you know, this would be something obviously a little larger than what we've had in the past. So we'll have to obviously pay a little bit of close attention to kind of the phasing of the work and really stay in tune or stay in communication with the event organizers so that everybody understands what to expect, I guess, during that time frame.
Jason loves your question, Deb. Oh, Alderman, go back.
We'll figure something out for River West, and if we don't figure it out, the race will. The race. I remember that several years ago there was a big trench on North Avenue, and the race organizers were already starting. I don't know if they'd started building it yet, but they were designing their own handmade wooden bike bridge over the trench. But Jeff beat him to the punch and got the contractor to pave it at the crossing on Booth. So we'll figure something out.
Again, big fan of River West 24.
So that was our last written comment. I have turned on the raise hand feature if anyone would like to make a statement or ask a question verbally. We have 15 minutes remaining. And I don't see any hands raised at the moment. So just kind of to recap, more information will be posted on the project website. We have a comment online form that you can fill out, as well as a way to sign up for project updates. So following this meeting, we can share this presentation as well as Milwaukee Waterworks presentation via email to everyone who's registered to attend this meeting, as well as who signed up for updates.
And please encourage your neighbors who weren't here, and if they review the website for the details, to email us, let us know their thoughts or questions, changes you'd like to see or modifications. And although the time is, we were kind of given a little bit of a reprieve by confirming that we're going to do the water work next year, but not that much, right, Dave? What is the timing? When do we have to get these designs in if we're going to make changes?
The project, here's the schedule. We have a final plan submittal in less than a year, which, we need to, in the next 2 weeks, make that final determination as to the alternative that we're going to move forward with final design in order to meet that deadline. There's a lot of documentation that needs to take place, as well as coordination with the utility companies to make sure that they have adequate time to get their work plans developed, any materials that they need to order for relocating their facilities, as well as getting out there and getting the work done. So it's kind of a tight time frame that we're working under. We appreciate everybody's patience as we get through this. We should be making a determination relatively quickly here.
And Teresa wants to remind the public that we would like comments by October 1st, if possible. So everyone who's still remaining on the call, I just want to say thank you for attending, asking these great questions and providing your input. It is so helpful when we are designing a major infrastructure project. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation as well.
Jason's last comment is, thanks team, I love what I'm seeing. Thank you so much for your hard work. I'm super happy to make my home in River West. Wish I could have all of this on Keefe too. So we have about 10 minutes remaining for any last minute questions or comments. Robert Schneider, thanks again. Take a well-earned rest for the night. Thanks, Robert. And Rich asked, would you please switch to the final contact slide? That is a great suggestion. David, could you go to the last slide with our contact information?
It should be up now.
Thank you. And if anyone wants an update, the Brewers are down 1-6 in the bottom of the 7th. Just got a notification. Brent says, thank you for following up on the comments from the last meeting. Alternative 2 looks great and certainly sets a standard for complete streets in Milwaukee. Larry Hoffman, is there any chance of shortening the intervals at the traffic signals at Burleigh and Keith? I can direct that question to our traffic engineer and follow up with you, Larry, directly. I do have your contact information. So stay tuned. We have 10 attendees still online. We have 5 minutes left of this public meeting if you have any last minute questions or comments. Roseanne appreciates the time, thoughtful planning, and excellent public information pieces you have made available. Thank you. I definitely feel Alternative 2 will provide improved traffic and bicycle safety. Thanks, Roseanne.
The Brewers are still losing, but so are the Cardinals, 6-0. So we'll probably be a game back of both the Cardinals and the Reds. Current situation stays the same, and then we win 3-5 against St. Louis, be tied with them, win the tiebreak, but then they play 2 extra games against Detroit. We might need to win 4 out of 5 against St. Louis.
You're assuming that we're not going to come back tonight. We still have 2 innings.
That's true. There's still 2 innings. I stand corrected, and I'm glad this is being recorded. Jeff's on the record predicting that.
But really, all we need is the wild card anyway, so it doesn't. We can all four Central teams can get in.
That is true.
Although Philadelphia is winning,
Oh, that's not good.
so they'll be tied with that for that last spot. And San Francisco plays later tonight. If they win, they'll be a game ahead. We're tied with San Francisco now, but we have the tiebreak on them.
We should have had a slide here with all the different scenarios of the Brewers being able to get in.
You missed the Alderman's notebook. He's got that all written out.
Oh, he does. I'm sure he does. Well, nice job, everybody. I think, you know, this, I think the presentation came together really nicely. I think we have some good comments here to move forward, and, you know, let's to get together after the October 1st, I guess, timeframe for collecting those comments, and we can have a conversation with you, Alderman.
You're muted.
I'll forward everything I get to your team as well. So we'll make sure we have all the feedback in one spot.
All right.
Great. Thank you again for serving as panelists. This meeting has concluded. Have a great night.
Thanks, Megan.
Take
You
care.
too, Megan. Thank you very much. Night.
Good night.
Good night.